Hello and welcome again to Cherry Red TV. I'm Iain McNay and my guest today is Mike Hurst. Hi Mike.
Iain.
And Mike's had a very rich career over many years. He was originally in the Springfields and had some hits there. And then when he left, he had a solo career, but he really came to prominence as a producer. And he produced the first Marc Bolan single. He discovered and produced the early Cat Stevens singles. And then he went on to have huge success with Showaddywaddy, Shakin Stevens, who he also managed. And along the way, produced a lot of other fascinating people. So we're gonna look at Mike's career as such, and also find out a little bit deeper why he was so successful, his secrets, if you like, and here's some jolly good stories as well. So Mike, when you were, I think, 16, 17, very young, you met Buddy Holly and Eddie Cochran.
Yeah, I was 15.
15,
at
yeah.
the time. The two of them, I'm not together. But my mum was a great mum. Someone should do a TV series on people in the music business and acting profession whose mothers were responsible for their success. My mum, bless her heart, she took me to the Gaumont State in Kilburn. Whenever there was a music show on, I saw Louis Armstrong, I saw Duke Ellington, I saw Stan Kenton, and then I saw the rock and roll stars, Bill Haley, and finally Buddy Holly. And I got to the stage door at the end of the show before anybody else, and I was ahead of the queue. And stage door manager came out and I said, could I see Buddy Holly? He said, you got to be joking, son. I said, no, please, could you ask? He signed my program. So he disappeared. 10 minutes later, the door opens again. There's this tall, gangly guy in horn-rimmed glasses. How you doing, son? I said, Buddy Holly. And you say dumb things when you're a kid. I blurted out, I'm learning to play the guitar. And instead of telling me to F off, he politely said, son, you go and do that, you're going to be a star. And I thought, oh, Buddy Holly. And that was it. That was it. So next thing is, I think in 59, Buddy's dead. And I auditioned for the Oh Boy television show, Jack Good show. And it was down at the East End of London, the studios, rehearsal studios. And I got there and I went in, I did an audition, and Jack Good said in his impeccable Jack Good BBC voice, come back when your voice has established a character. I'm not sure what that meant. So I said, oh dear, okay. And as I went out, there's a guy in a flying jacket sitting on his chair. I looked at him and thought, God, it's Eddie Cochran. So he looked at me and said, don't worry, he said, people can be wrong, just keep at it. And I thought, oh, what? Eddie Cochran said that to me. That's too much. That was my experience of Buddy Holly and Eddie Cochran.
Yeah, but you see, that already shows me a lot about your character. Insofar with Buddy Holly, you weren't going to take no as an answer from the doorman. You were persistent, and somewhere he responded. And that's what you have to do in life, isn't it, to get on?
My mum had taught me about that, because she'd always been in show business for kids. She taught kids. And she always taught me about being a survivor. And she said, anybody who says to you, can you do this? Always say yes. And I no, really, I'm serious. And so when anybody said, can you do this? And I have to jump in here. So in 1959, same year as Eddie Cochran, I'm doing an appearance at one of my mother's theatre shows at the Metropolitan Edgware Road. So I'm out there with my cheap guitar playing and everything else. And I finished my little number and came off. And there's a woman standing in the wings. And she said, I'm the official secretary of the Elvis Presley fan club. Oh, I went, this is thrilling. I really did. And she said, Elvis will love you. I thought, Elvis will love me. Oh, boy. You see, I thought this was all a bit of a wind-up. But no, a week later, she said, the premiere of Elvis's new film, Jailhouse Rock, is at the Empire Leicester Square. We would like you to sing at the premiere. I thought, hey, this is it. I've made it. I'm going to sing at the Empire Leicester Square for the Elvis's premiere. Fantastic. So the night came, and I turned up with my beaten up famous guitar in almost a cardboard case, and my mum walked in this secretary of the Elvis Presley fan club standing there, and I said, Jean, I said, when do I go on? She said, now. So I looked around, I said, where? She said, here. I said, here? In the foyer? She said, yes. So I stood with my guitar. One fool party in the county jail. But I sang this with people walking past me, behind me, in front of me, everywhere, paying no attention to me at all. I finished. She said, do it again. I said, what? I sang it 7 times and died every time. So I remember my mother's old adage all those years later, say yes to everything, and I wasn't sure I was right about that one. But yeah, it's my early introduction to trying to get out there and do it.
And of course, it was your mother that noticed an advert in Stage magazine.
It was.
That got you a really big break.
It was. My mum saw an ad in the Stage, said wanted young singer-guitarist for well-established group. Didn't say who the group was, you see. And Mum didn't tell me. The reason she didn't tell me is if it didn't work and they never came back to me, I wouldn't be disappointed because I'd never have known. But she got a reply, and then she told me what she'd done. And the reply said, turn up or, you know, apply for audition, turn up at Quaglino's in St. James's, very famous old nightclub, for an audition. So I turned up at Quaglino's. Quaglino's, I don't know if anybody's ever been there. It's still a pretty plush place. I turned up with my guitar case. This guy with pinstripe trousers and a black jacket looked at me and said, yes. I said, I've come for the audition. He said, not here. He said, downstairs in the Allegro. There's a club for young people in the basement. So I went down there, and this guy, it became like a Peter Sellers movie. This guy turned up in a long British warm overcoat and a monocle. And he said, hey, hello. I looked at him, I said, hello. He said, Michael. So I said, yes. He said, fine. He said, you'll be on in just a moment. I'll come and get you. Wait here. So he walked off, and I thought, what is this? This is not rock and roll. I don't understand it. So about 10 minutes later, another guy walked out of the Allegro and past me. And as he went past, I looked at him and I thought, that's Lonnie Donegan's guitarist. If he's come for an audition, what the hell chance do I have? Nothing. So finally, this chap in the British warm overcoat came out again and said, Michael, come through. Walked through. It was a tiny little stage with spotlights on it. And I couldn't see further than the front row of the few seats that were there. So a voice said, okay, Mike, sing us a song. So I thought, how long's a piece of string? So I sang, I just got your letter, baby. Mess of Blues, Elvis, you see, did this. Finished, voice said, very good. Said, can you sing a song in a foreign language? And I thought, this is really winding me up. This is not rock and roll. But my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was Italian. So here's where you get lucky. So I knew a couple of Italian folk songs that he'd always sung when I was a little kid. So I launched into Lazzarella, and I sang this Lazzarella song. Voice said, thank you, very good. We'll get in touch with you, let you know. I thought, yeah, I bet you will. I still didn't know who it was for. And as I got off this little stage with my guitar, I saw this figure walk across behind the light with a mass of sort of peroxide hair. And I thought, I've seen her before somewhere. Because they'd done a lot of TV work, you see, the Springfields. So I thought, that girl, Dusty Springfield. So anyway, I went home. I thought, I'll never hear another word. 4 days later, I got a letter through the post, which I still have. I have a letter. Said, dear Mike, we'd like you to join the Springfields as of whenever, the end of next month, ready for rehearsals and all the rest. I thought, good God, talk about all your birthdays coming at once. I couldn't believe it. So talk about, I mean, lucky or what?
But the amazing thing also is that they haven't met you.
No.
They didn't know whether you get on with them okay.
Absolutely. And you know the other thing they did, which very few groups would do to any newcomer at all, they've split it 3 ways. They didn't say to me, you're a junior member, you're on a salary, or you're on a lesser percentage. They said we split things 3 ways. That's it. Fantastic.
Yeah, but these days it's so important that when someone leaves a band, someone else comes in, there's a chemistry, and they spend time, and Are they a drinker? Are they not a drinker? What's their lifestyle?
We had the chemistry. It's funny. They didn't know that, I agree with you, at the time. But in the first rehearsals, the chemistry between Dusty and me. See, Dusty was a goon show fanatic. I was a goon show fanatic.
Okay.
So we had the same sense of humor. Tom was just Tom in another world. So we couldn't avoid getting on because he was harmless to me. He's a nice guy.
Yeah. So what was it like? Okay, so excuse me, here you were joining a band. They'd had, I think, 2 top 30 records. They were pretty successful.
Yeah.
What was it like at a young age being thrown into that kind of environment?
Hey, it's like I said, it's all your birthdays have come at once.
Yeah, but practically, what's it like when you...
Well, sitting in the rehearsal room for a start, I was very lucky because the person I replaced, Tim Field, Tim was not a natural performer and artist. He was an old Etonian to begin with. So he almost set the trend for public school boys coming into the music business in the 60s. But he was a cabaret performer. Tom was a cabaret performer. Dusty was not a cabaret performer. So she knew instinctively that I wasn't either. So the two of us reacted to one another during rehearsals. It was so cheesy though. Tom wanted everyone to smile all the time. And I couldn't quite cope with that. Keep smiling. That's a hell of a problem. That's a cabaret performer style. Wasn't my style, wasn't Dusty's. So we were 2-1 there. So I was lucky. We changed. And the first thing that happened for me is we went to America. Look at it. I'm a 19-year-old kid and suddenly I'm on a jet flying to New York.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I mean, that's just wonderful. Wonderful.
And you had a hit in America too, didn't you?
We
Fairly
did
early
Silver
on.
Threads. The first thing that happens to me, I join the group, we have Silver Threads. It goes into the top 20 in America. It's the first single by a British group, not a solo artist, a British group, to ever have a top 20 record in the USA. So we had that, and I flew into that. We flew to Nashville, and we recorded in Nashville, which is another story again.
And what was it like being in the group with Dusty? Because you hear a lot of things about her now, that she was very difficult. Obviously, she's gone now, but she was very difficult.
Yeah, she was difficult, but she was difficult because she was a pro. She was a dyed-in-the-wool pro. Whether you like it or hate it, her attitude, I could always somehow justify. I might not have liked the means, but I could justify what she did. For example, a famous impresario books us for a show in Liverpool after we just got a couple of amplifiers for our guitars, Tom and I. And we're doing a run-through and rehearsing, and a voice at the back of the stall suddenly says, "What are those boxes you got on stage?" So Dusty said over the mic, "They're amplifiers for the guitars." "Yeah, well, they ruin the look of the act. They'll have to go." And Dusty, before I or Tom could say anything, said, "They're not going. They're part of the act." And a woman's voice says, "Don't let her speak to you like that, Harold." And Dusty says, "And you can tell that stupid bitch we'll do what we want." And the impresario, his wife, Harold Fielding, he came down to the front and he said, "You will never appear in one of my theatres again." And we didn't.
Yeah.
So we got into trouble like that. But she was right.
She spoke her mind.
Oh, sure.
And she got her way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we had dinner together quite recently, one of the things that we were talking about also is how during this time the Beatles were just emerging. And in fact, I think you actually introduced Jane Asher to Paul McCartney. But anyway, we don't have to go into that particularly. But you were in this situation, you were quite friendly with Paul, you got in a taxi with him, and you got out of a taxi and you were suddenly really mobbed. And that shocked you, didn't it? Because
yeah. I mean, we'd had fans, Springfield fans. I mean, so polite. They queue up outside the stage door and we just signed this. I mean, nothing to write home about, but very nice. With Paul, I was aware of what was happening with Beatlemania, but when we got out of that cab in Regent Street, near the old Austin Reed store, it was as if, I don't know, every famous person in the world had stepped out of a taxi. The crowds just came whoom, like that. And we were just hemmed in and surrounded by people. And Paul was obviously by this time used to it. He said, "Come on," he said, "let's go this way." And we ran through the crowd and across the road into Austin Reed's. And they hid Paul. I mean, I was with him, so they hid me as well. And we got out the back way into Sackville Street and escaped that way. But I was horrified by that. Didn't like it at all.
So there was something really changing in how the public, the fans, related to the performers, which hadn't been there before, and it was...
No, it hadn't, not even for Cliff. No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. The Beatles had that.
Yeah. And then moving forward on, because there's so much to talk about with you, moving forward, you had a couple of more hits in the UK. You were, as an act, you were pretty big. And then suddenly you were told that the group was breaking up.
What a shock. It was a shock for me. Actually, it wasn't a shock for me. That's not true. The Winter Gardens, Blackpool, sitting in there having tea before we did a show that evening. And how it came about was Tom looked at the two of us and said, he really did, I promise you this is true. He said, why don't we break up? So Dusty said, that's a good idea. What do you think, Mike? I'm 20 years old still. I thought, yeah, that's fair enough. No problem at all. I said, yeah, that's a good idea. Why not? It was only later, and I'm talking about a year or 2 years even later, I discovered the whole thing was a put-up job because Dusty had already recorded her first single as a solo
Only Want to Be
artist.
With You.
Yeah. And no one told me. They just said, yeah, let's break up. So I didn't know. And the shock, the press, do you know, every what we would call now serious newspapers for whatever reason, Telegraph, Times, Guardian, whatever, had headlines. Shock, horror, Springfields breaks up. Hey, I mean, I just thought I wouldn't have a problem in getting anywhere by myself. I really did. I was that naive, but I repeat, I was only 20, 21, coming up to 21. I didn't know. I thought it would be easy.
And your last appearance was at the Palladium.
Oh, Sunday night at London Palladium. Do you know how many people watched that show? And it's true. Remembering there was no satellite, obviously, there was no streaming, there was no anything. All it was 2 television stations, BBC, ITV. This was ATV, as I think it happened. Sunday night at London Palladium. The viewing audience for that show, the last show of the Springfields, 21 million people. So when they now talk about, I have fantastic viewing figures of 7.5 million, nothing like it was.
Yeah.
21 million. And Bruce Forsyth came out with his cigarette boxes and said, we're going to give you this on behalf of the London Palladium, you see. And no one's ever forgotten who saw it, that Dusty took this silver cigarette box, opened and said, what's in it, money? And people since then said to me, God, that's a really sort of mean thing to say. And I said, really? Really? I said, you don't know what we got paid for that. 21 million people watching that show. We got paid £375, split 3 ways.
Yeah.
I said, these days, anybody gets an audience of 21 million, I said, we could have made ourselves £1 million each.
Yeah.
Different world.
Yeah. Yeah. So Springfields broke up. Dusty obviously went on to stardom. What happened to you after that?
I wanted a band to play the music I wanted to play. And I was convinced I could do it. It was going to be called, ultimately country rock, Elton John. But this was 1964, so I started a band. I had Tony Ashton on keyboards. I had Ray Smith on guitar. And I wanted another lead guitarist. I looked for a lead guitarist in Denmark Street, great place to go in London for guitarists. And I said to the guy behind the bar, anybody looking for a gig now? And he said, yeah. He said, that kid sitting in that booth over there, he says he's good. So I went and sat with this guy with long curly hair down here. I said, I hear you're good. He looked at me seriously and said, I'm great, man. Well, you can't argue with that. You see, so I said, right. I said, how old are you? 17. I said, what's your name? He said, Jimmy Page. I said, Jimmy. I said, do you want to join the band? He said, why not? He lasted with me 2 months before he went off to join the Yardbirds. And I replaced him with a guy called Albert Lee, who's still one of the best guitarists, I think, in the world. We had a great band. Trouble
It's
is,
called The Methods, right?
yeah, we played the wrong music. Nobody wanted to hear country rock music in 1964. They wanted to hear Liverpool. We didn't do Liverpool, but we toured with Gene Pitney, Billy J. Kramer, Cilla Black, and we had a good time, but nothing sold. So we split up at the end of 64 and I became a record producer.
Yeah, but you also went through a time, and I'm just picking up some notes I found on the internet, that you actually had a situation where you couldn't get bookings in the South and you were playing in northern clubs, which are challenging. We all know historically they're challenging.
That's one way of putting it, Ian. Yeah, challenging. After the group broke up, I still had to earn some money. So yes, I did some northern clubs, Bolton Casino, Burnley Casino, Liverpool Cabaret Club. Trouble is I was doing them by myself. So I walk in there for rehearsals on a Sunday with my guitar and I'd say, is there a backing band here? He says, she's over there on keyboard. I look at this sort of vaguely elderly woman sitting smiling behind a keyboard. And she said, have you got your dots? Meaning music. And I said, no. I said, can you follow me? She said, no, not without your dots. So I said, don't worry. I said, I'd do it by myself. So I did, and I played in wrestling rings in between the bouts. Can you imagine the smell of the sweat and everything else? It was horrific. And I used to take sleeping pills to get to sleep if I was staying there overnight, and uppers to keep me going so I could drive home because I couldn't stand staying up there. Yeah, it was not a good time.
But you kept going.
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
Yeah.
And then I think it was when you met your second wife.
Yeah.
She actually said to you, why don't you become a record producer?
She did, and I said, I can't do that. I don't know how to do it. And she said, yeah, you do. You've been produced. She said, what did your producer do? I said, Johnny France. I said, what he did was read the Daily Telegraph on the desk. And when we finished a take, he'd press a button and go, second violin's flat on letter C, and go back to reading the paper. And I said, the trouble was he was right. She said, well, you can do that. I said, well, I guess I can. So I went to work for Andrew Oldham, who just started Immediate, or the production company.
Because this is Andrew Oldham, who managed the Stones.
Stones manager.
Yeah.
And Mickey Most, who was just becoming successful as the first big independent producer in Britain. And I learned how to produce records by doing, if you'll excuse the expression, their crap for them that they didn't want to do. They gave the rubbish to me.
So
it's okay.
I pulled the information off that off the internet that the first record you produced was the Golden Apples of the Sun for the Immediate label.
Yeah.
Can you hum that now?
No. I can't even remember. What was the track called? Do we know?
I don't know.
No, I have no idea. No idea. My first, as it turns out, what Mickey used to do, Mickey Most was notorious for this. He gave me his rubbish to do, but if by any chance it was remotely successful, he'd make sure his name was on the record, not yours. And my first hit record was Barry St. John, Come Away Melinda. And it crept into the charts at number 43 or 44 and disappeared again. But Mickey had put his name on it just in case it was going to be a hit. And that infuriated me because I say that was my record and it was a chart record. That was the first record I ever made myself that was a chart number.
But in those days, did you get paid a fee or did you get a percentage?
I don't know, no percentage. I don't think I ever got paid anything by these guys. I was learning. I somehow took it as that's what you do when you're learning. You don't get paid.
But you see, you got yourself involved there with two extraordinary characters, Andrew Loog Oldham, Mickey Most. Both had great success. Both were pushy, unconventional people. They weren't always liked. I think Mickey Most, you weren't. You had a phrase for him, a dyed-in-the-wool bastard, you called him.
Did I call him a dyed-in-the-wool bastard? Well, to be absolutely fair, he's not with us and hasn't been for years, so I think I can say that. Yeah, he was, but then on the other hand, was he, I asked myself, because he did what he did for himself, and it's a selfish business, the entertainment business. Andrew I always liked, because Andrew was a nutter. I liked Andrew because I like nutters, you see.
Yeah.
So I could cope with
and again, there's a story you tell about how you were in a situation where I think you first met him. He came in the room and Del Shannon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was with Del Shannon in Del's dressing room. There's a knock on the door. I opened it, and there's this guy in green-coloured shades standing there, and he said, "Hello, I'm Andrew Loog Oldham." I said, "Really?" And he said, yeah. He said, I'd like to see Mr. Shannon. And Del was sitting behind me. He looked around behind me and said, yeah, what can I do for you? And the guy said, your PR's crap. He said, I could do a much better job for you. And I tell you, that's really upfront stuff. And Del Shannon signed him up on the spot to do his publicity.
Yeah.
And he was great.
Yeah.
Andrew was good.
It's another example, isn't it? You've got to believe in yourself and push to get on.
Yeah.
It's no good just sort of waiting for people to come to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you produced Marc Bolan's first single, The Wizard. I wonder how that came about.
Came about, I was working by this time for an American guy called Jim Economides, who turned out to be the greatest con man I'd ever come across. And he'd found this guy, Marc Bolan, or Marc Bolan had found him. And Jim said to me, would you do a record with him? So I went into Decca at Broadhurst Gardens and I did The Wizard. And I always remember Marc sounded so rough and raw. It was real old-fashioned rock and roll, which I liked the sound. But nothing happened with it. And Marc, of course, went on to be T-Rex about 4 or 5 years later. But we got on quite well, but if you're not having any success with something, by the time his second one came out, Third Degree, that didn't make it either. But in the same thing, in the same Jim Economides' office, having met Marc Bolan there, another guy, aged 17, had come in to see me, played me a song called Here Comes My Baby. I said, that's great. I said, what's your name? He said, Stephen Georgiou, but I changed it to Stephen Adams. Now I changed it again, but it's such a stupid name, I'm going to change it again. I said, what are you going to change it to? He said, well, this girl says I got eyes like a cat, and she said I should call myself Cat Stevens. I said, seriously, I said, that's a great name. I said, fantastic, keep the name. He did, as we know, till 1982 when he became Yusuf Islam. And after much nagging by me and other people, he finally changed it to Yusuf Cat Stevens. So he's had 5 name changes. Yeah. But when he came in and played me this song, I took it to Jim Economides. He said, boob, that's shit. I looked at him, I said, really? I said, no, it's not. I said, it's better than Marc Bolan. I said, this guy's really great. He said, oh, forget it, you see. So I went back to Cat and I said, I can't do anything. The guy, the boss, doesn't want to sign you. So he left and disappeared. The whole company went bust anyway. I'm trying to figure out whether I should take a job in Los Angeles, which I've been offered. And I'm sitting in number 7 Priory Road with my wife and my 2 children are sitting there. And the doorbell goes on Saturday morning, never forgotten it. I went to the door, opened it. Cat Stevens is standing there with his guitar case. And he says, you're still interested in me? I said, well, of course I am. He said, I've been to every record company in London. Nobody wants to know about me. So I said, really? He said, I've got a new song I want to play you. Play away. Play me, I love my dog as much as I love you. But I listened to this, I thought, that's so unusual, that's really weird. I said, yeah, let's do it. So that's the plan, that's what we planned to do. And we did.
So just going back briefly to Marc Bolan, did you see his potential at that stage?
Yeah, I did.
And what did you see in him particularly?
He was the guy, listen, you have to be honest about the music business. It's like the story of life. When people look at a class of children and people say, the best looking children get all the dividends that people hand out. This is true because teachers and people warm straight towards somebody who happens to look really good. Marc Bolan is one of those guys. He's a good looking kid. So that's phase 1 out of the way. You've got someone who looks that good and everything else. 2, can he play and sing? Answer patently, yes. 3, does he have a hit song? And that's the biggest problem of all, does he have a hit song? If you ask me honestly now, after all these years, did that surprise me that it wasn't a hit? Answer no, because I thought The Wizard was very freaky. You know why it was called The Wizard? He was a Tolkien buff. So he'd say to me, Mike, he said, The Wizard. So I said, well, why is it called The Wizard? He said, because he's there. I said, where is he right now? He's outside that window in that tree, man. And he was gone. I mean, to him, Gandalf and everything else, which I didn't know because I hadn't then read Tolkien. But that was it. So that was the thing. But he had all the pieces except that, for me, except that one ingredient, the hit song. Cat Stevens, fractionally. He had the looks, he had the voice, and by God, for me, he had the songs.
Yeah.
So everything slotted into place.
And then, I'm just trying to get this in sequence. So you actually, I think it was Chris Bruff when you first met Chris Bruff.
My business partner.
Yeah, he was the one that helped get the money together for the musicians.
He did, and I blagged the studio time.
By telling a bit of a porky.
Yeah, I went to Dick Rowe at Decca and I said, I'm going to work in America. I want to make a farewell record. Tears, tears. I said, could you give me some studio time at Decca Studios? Well, it's always very short on time, though. He said, but I tell you what, I'll give you 3 hours and no more, 3 hours maximum. He said, just for old time's sake. Went into Studio 2 at Decca Broadhouse Gardens with Cat Stevens. Record I Love My Dog with a ridiculous arrangement. No drum beat. If you listen to that record, every record up until today, boom, chaka, boom, chaka, boom, chaka. That had dum, 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 da, da, dum, 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 no bomb, bomb. And I thought it was the funniest and weirdest thing I'd ever heard. It was bizarre, but it was so different. I knew. Anyway, we had 15 minutes left for our 3 hours because they were very serious about the 3 hours. And I said, we need a B-side. So Steve gets up and goes, getting hung up all day on smiles, walking down Portobello Road for miles. Does a folky thing, Portobello Road, just him and guitar. So I said, right, that's it, 3 hours, that's it. So I went into Decca the next day with a acetate, as they used to call them, a first cut of a record. And I said to Dick Rowe, I said, look, Dick, I'm sorry. I said, you know you gave me 3 hours. He said, yes. I said, I didn't really tell you the truth. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I wanted to record a new artist. I said, and I used it for doing. He said, how dare you? He said, I would, out of the goodness of my heart and Decca's heart, he said, we gave you this time. He said, look what you've done. He said, you've thrown it back in my, I said, would you just listen to it? Just listen to it. Puts the record on the turntable, puts the arm on, plays I Love My Dog, finishes, takes the arm off, looks at me and goes, to the phone. Put me through to Sir Edward. Sir Edward Lewis, the chairman of Decca, the big man. Sir Edward, would you come down? I've got something you'd be interested in. Puts it down. I thought, oh my God, he's got the chairman's going to bite a chunk out of me. I'm dead. Sir Edward Lewis comes down, listens to I Love My Dog, utters the immortal words, which is again a Peter Sellers line, and says, my boy, you are a genius. Which I always love. Suddenly you're a ruddy genius. And says, this will launch our new label, DRAM. Cat Stevens and Chris Bruff, my business partner, were outside in the car because he hadn't had the guts to come upstairs with me. They were hiding in the car. So I went back down the stairs at Albert Embankment where the offices were. And they looked at me and said, what happened? I said, we've had it. We're finished. We've got nothing. And I said, yeah, your record's going to launch a brand new record label for Decca. And they went absolutely apeshit. And you couldn't blame them, could you, really? It was fantastic. So that was it.
And then you followed up with Matthew
and Son, yeah.
Another
and
hit.
Nobody wanted to play that. There's the hysterical thing. Having maximum airplay on the pirate stations for I Love My Dog. When I took him in Matthew and Son, they said, Mike, you got to be joking. It's nowhere near as good as I Love My Dog. I said, come on. I said, it's better. No, we could only play it for a week. If nobody really kicks in with it, the public, that is, he said, we'll have to take it off the air. So we do Pop In, which was a BBC music show, lunchtime show, on the Tuesday of the first week of release. I've never forgotten Tony Hall, bless his heart, who was head of promotion for Decca at that time, came running down the steps of the BBC studios in Lower Regent Street. And he said, Mike, he said, you'll never believe it. I said, what? He said, Matthew and Son. I said, what's happened? He said, 90,000 records today before lunch. Now I laugh when people talk about downloads and streams. Yeah. That's 90,000 in a morning when people were paying cash across the counter. That's proper money.
Yeah.
I understood that. That was great.
And who played bass on that?
John Paul Jones, John Baldwin.
Another Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin, sure.
Yeah, another connection.
John was a good friend of mine. Another contact is he took over my house in Priory Road. He rented that.
Yeah. So somehow you found these people at an early stage of their career.
I was very lucky.
Yeah. But then you fell out with Cat Stevens.
Yeah, it wasn't difficult. Because Steve, here's where I have to tell this very quickly and tell it against myself as much as for him or against him too. I was probably tough and arrogant at that time. Look, I was by this time a successful record producer. To be a record producer, you have to be a mixture of a nanny, a politician, and a musician, or one of those things. I tried to be all three. I obviously wasn't very good at being a politician because what happened was Steve got his brother involved with him. Blood is thicker than water. I should have known better. But when his brother started sticking his oar in and saying to me, I want this and I want that for Steve and everything, I'd look at him and I'd just say, that's because he's feathering your nest. He's just bought you a new Mercedes and everything. I said, what do you know about the music business? And I really lost my temper with him. And of course, I say, blood is thicker than water. Steve ended up siding with his brother or wanting to leave me and leave my company. So we had a court case. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that difficult for you, that there you'd finally got an artist that you'd nurtured and you had 2 hit singles and then you fall out? Yeah,
well, we had in the lower half of the top 40, I suppose we have 5 hits in all, and the albums, 2 albums, New Masters and Matthew and Son. You know, what was going to come after that? I didn't know. He wanted to change direction, Steve. That's the point. He wanted to be something else. I didn't see it, and I was wrong. I was wrong, I freely admit it. He was right. He wanted to go back and delve more into folk music or that approach to pop music on the folkier side. I didn't see that at all. But he was right. Court case was settled out of court. They normally are because you don't want to pay legal fees.
Of course, yeah. But anyway, you kind of landed on your feet, and I've got a whole list of people that you produced afterwards. So I think the next artist you produced was PP Arnold, the first cut as the deepest.
Yeah, that was before I split with Steve. And that was great because Andrew Oldham, who I told you, I liked him, even though he was a nutter. I liked Andrew. Andrew rang me up, said he'd sign one of the Ikettes, Ike Turner's group, called PP Arnold. And did I have a song for her? Well, Steve had just paid me the first cut as the deepest. And I said, great. He said, I don't want to do it as a single. I said, okay. I said, I'll take it to PP Arnold, see if Andrew likes it and she likes it. Took it in, they loved it. So yeah, we did first cut as the deepest with Pat and bang, became a hit.
But she wasn't so easy in the studio the first time, was she?
No, not the first time. That's because Andrew's way of plying everybody with drugs seemed like a good idea to him in those days. I didn't like it because I've never been that way inclined because I'm a family man. I've got children. I never wanted to see that happen to any of them, so I never liked it. When she arrived for the first run-through in the studios, you know, bless her heart, she was out of her head.
Yeah.
She couldn't even sit on a stool properly in front of a microphone. So I said, bring her back when she's not like this. I can't work like that. So they did. The following week, she came back and she was perfect.
Yeah.
And she apologized. And she was right. That's the 60s. It was like that in the 60s, you know.
But did you realize the first cut with the deepest would become such a standard?
A classic.
Yeah.
If you ask me, what are the songs I've done in my life that are classics that I'm proud of? First cut is the deepest is always the one that I say. But the answer to you is no, I never realized it would become a classic. At the time, I was thrilled by it because I was doing a Phil Spector. I had 2 of everything, 2 keyboards, 2 drummers, 2 bass guitars, double everything. I had 35 musicians in the studio. It was exciting.
Yeah.
It's like flying a 747 jumbo jet, I think. It's fantastic.
And then you produced Manfred Mann, Mighty Quinn.
That was a freaky one. Mighty Quinn, that's another classic. I mean, I was watching, I think, a rerun of Life on Mars the other day. Do you remember that, the John Sim series?
Yes.
And in it, somebody's walking around whistling. If I could whistle now. Mighty Quinn. And I thought, yeah, that's it. Mighty Quinn should never have happened for me because I didn't want to do it. They played me, Manfred played me Bob Dylan's original version demo, and I said, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. I said, the lyrics are terrible. Ain't she nothing like Mighty Quinn? I thought, that's awful. Manfred said, no, it's a hit, it's a hit. I said, I can't believe it. He said, yeah, come on, let's do it. So we did it. It's #1 in most countries around the world. That was freaky.
Yeah.
So I owe that to Manfred, not to me.
So at this stage in your career, the artists were coming to you to be produced by you. It's
Paul and Barry Ryan, people like that. Spencer Davis.
Colin Blunstone, she's not there.
Colin Blunstone. I come to him with an idea of doing the Zombies hit. So it must have been one of the first remakes of a hit.
Yes.
Until it became fashionable in the mid-70s, late 70s. But it was quite novel.
Yeah. And then, well, before we get on to your next really big artist in terms of sales, anyway, you're involved with New World?
Yeah, that was a funny one. They won, was it New Faces or Up Knocks? I think it was New Faces. Talent show. They won that, and Mickey had signed them to Rack Records, Mickey Most. And I said, yeah, I produced them. He asked me, that's the funny thing, he didn't want to do it. I know he didn't want to do it because he thought it wouldn't happen. So he asked me if I'd do it. So I said, yeah, this time I got a contract and everything else. So I made Rose Garden, which was a Lynn Anderson track, which then it was usual to do a cover version, as you know, of American hits for the UK market and vice versa. So I did this with New World. They dutifully won their New Faces I think it was Opportunity Knocks. It was Op Knocks. They dutifully won that because it was rigged for them to win it. Mickey was in bed with ATV and the producers of Opportunity Knocks. It's all a fix. Again, I have to say, you won't believe me, but I didn't know. I had no idea until the producer of the television show said to me, and when they do this song on the All Winners show, I looked at him and I said, if? He said, no, when? And it suddenly twigged and I thought, yeah, the whole thing's a fix, which it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a hit and the next 3 records for them were hits.
Yeah.
And then I got lucky and found an idea of doing a song called Wild Thing.
So that was Fancy.
Yeah.
Who didn't do much in the UK, but were in America were significant, weren't they?
Yeah. They were a super group, and nobody knew it. Ray Fennick, one of the best guitarists in the country, Mo Foster, one of the best bass guitarists in the country, and Les Binks, who became Judas Priest's drummer, and Annie Kavanagh, of course, the singer. They were fantastic. Problem was, and this is the eternal problem of the record producer, what I did to make a hit, first of all, before I classified them as a group, was just a one-off commercial studio musician record with a Penthouse pet, Helen Kunt, breathing all over it. Wild Thing. See, and I made it because I thought a woman doing this day and age, you couldn't do it. I thought a woman doing this is really sexy. This is going to drive people crazy. And I did it, Wild Thing, in a very raunchy version with this young lady. Took it in to Atlantic Records UK. We can't put that out. So I thought, oh, well, I lost that one. Next thing I know, someone in Atlantic in London sent it to America. Big Tree, part of Atlantic Records, Big Tree picks up and says, that's a hit record, gotta have it. Put it out, top 20 in the USA. Huge hit. Americans loved it, and they still do. I have people who speak to me from the States and say, I remember where I was when I first heard that record, and I have to imagine where they were. It was a very sexy record.
So, I'm interested in this. What is it in you at that time that knew what was a hit and what wouldn't be a hit? Was it instinct?
Yes, it's an instinct. It's only an instinct that works occasionally. If it was right all the time, you'd be a bloody genius. I'm not a bloody genius, but I do have an instinct for certain things. I knew that Wild Thing record, I knew it was a hit. And it proved it did happen. So then I put them together as a group, got rid of the Penthouse Pet and got a fantastic singer, Annie Kavanagh. The American public didn't want this. They liked the heavy breathing and the commercial record. They didn't want 4 great musicians who could play fantastic music. We toured America. We had a hit with the follow-up, which I wrote, Touch Me. We had a hit with that, but after that, zilch. Because they weren't what the general public in America wanted.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad,
Yeah.
but a salutary lesson.
Well, I guess you're always in this situation at some point where something works and it stops working. And in this situation, it was because you felt that the formula that worked wasn't actually what you wanted to do, because you wanted to actually make it more of a musician type band.
I wanted to have a supergroup. I wanted to have a great band, and they were. If you listen to that first album, just called Fancy Wild Thing, they're great. I mean, truly, truly great. But that's life.
Anyway, we'll come on now to what your biggest act, not necessarily your most prestigious act, but Showaddywaddy. And again, you told me the story that, because that's when we first met, because I worked at Belle Records all those moons ago. And you went in to see Dick Leahy to talk about Showaddywaddy. Yeah. You didn't have a tape or anything.
No, I had nothing. I walked into Dick Leahy, who was one, and you'd have to agree, one of the best record men.
Had tremendous track record.
In the country, fantastic. Yeah. I said, you heard about this group who just won New Faces? That was New Faces. I said, called Showaddywaddy. Dick, in typical fashion, said, what a stupid name that is. He said, I wouldn't be interested in them if they come off a talent show. I said, ooh. I said, they've got an audience. He said, nah, give it a rest. His PA, whose name I can't remember. Diane, saying her, she called over from the other side of the room, Dick, they're really good. Dick goes, what? She said, I saw them, they're really good. And I said, look, Dick, I'll tell you, I've been to a club up in South Shields near Newcastle. I said, to see them live. I said, the audiences love them. They're just a mock rock and roll act. That's what the audience is like. So Dick said, oh. He said, perhaps I should sign them. I said, well, without hearing them. He said, yeah, why not? So he gave me a deal then and there on Showaddywaddy. And I went back to them and I said, I got you a record deal. And they said, what? I said, yeah. So what are we going to do? And they said, well, we got lots of old songs. I said, no old songs. I said, you do a song for yourself. You make more money that way. And they wrote this song, Hey Rock and Roll. We recorded it, played it to Dick. Dick said, yeah, it's a smash. He put it out big on a great label like Belle, which it was, certainly was. Wow, Shazam, happens. Number 2 in the charts. Number 2. Yeah,
but you know, it's extraordinary, isn't it? You go in there, you don't play him anything.
Yeah.
He's not interested. His secretary says they're good, and then he gives you a deal.
Yeah, but you see, you couldn't make that up, absolutely. And I know record men. Obi, Morris Oberstein at CBS. Obi, Dick Leahy, Larry Utah, who started Bell Records in the States.
Yeah.
These were record men. I understand record men because I may not be a record man, meaning an executive myself in a big company, but I can associate myself with record men because that's my life, that's my living. Without great record men, I couldn't have got anywhere. And unfortunately, this day and age, they don't exist, sadly.
And Showaddywaddy went on to have 17 consecutive top 40 hits.
Yeah.
And
people still laugh at them to this day. They go, oh, it is Showaddywaddy. Yeah. I say, yeah, 17 hits.
But they worked hard.
Yeah.
They made records that were commercial.
Sure.
And it worked.
Sure.
Yeah, they've had a few, they're still going, but they've had a few changes in lineup.
I think there's only one left.
Is that what it is? I saw them play a few years ago in Bath, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I think it was 6 then, and they were fine. They were still.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to now, before we move on from Showaddywaddy, Tell me the Fred Astaire story again.
The Fred Astaire story.
Because he was one of your all-time heroes, wasn't he?
Well, yes. Yes, he was. The CTS Studios at Wembley.
Yes.
In London. They did a lot of soundtrack work for movies.
That's right. I used to work there, so I know.
You did?
I did,
So
yeah.
of course you did.
Yeah.
So they were always actors, famous actors. Now to me, if anyone says to me today, who's the most famous person you've ever met? Now look, I know and have met through the years the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, everybody. But it's nothing like actors to me. If I see someone from celluloid fame, I think, oh God, it's them. Yeah, that's starstruck completely. So CTS Studios, I'm up there playing on a fruit machine in the interval between my sessions. And someone taps me on the shoulder, turn around, it's the head of the studios, Louis Ellman. And Louis says to me, Mike, he said, would you like to meet Fred Astaire? I looked at him, I said, pull the other one, Louis, it's got bells on. And he moved aside and he said, no, really? As he moved aside, there's Fred Astaire. I just looked at him and went, oh, I shook his hand. And we talked for a while, we were having a drink together. And then finally I said to him, and it takes a lot of gall to do that. I said, Mr. Astaire, he said, call me Fred. I said, okay, Fred. I said, you know what everyone always says about you? And I said, I always feel the same way. I said, your walk is like a dancer gliding across the floor. I said, could you show me how you do it? He said, sure. And he turned around in the bar facing the other way. And he did that walk down the bar, and then he swiveled around at the end. He did the walk back again. I just stood and looked at him like that. And he got back. I said, that's incredible. I said, you made my life. And it's true. It's Astaire.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. You could have done the same thing to me, yes, with Judy Garland's and people like it would have been exactly the same.
Yeah. So, Shakin Stevens.
Shaky.
When you found Shaky, he wasn't doing a lot, was he? He was in an Elvis show, funny enough.
Before that, he'd been with Track Records. Do you remember?
Really?
Shakin Stevens and the Sunsets were on Track.
Okay.
Which originally had been Chris Stamp and an offshoot of that lot.
Chris was Terrence's brother.
Chris was his brother.
Chris Stamp, and I forgot the other guy's name.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But he'll come back when we're finished. And no. Which artist are we talking about here?
Shakin Stevens.
Shaky. I'm as bad as Shaky. Shaky was like that then. Track Records asked me if I'd do some rock and roll tracks with Shaky. So I did. I did an album on Track. Nothing happened with it. Got some radio play, but nothing happened with it. Next thing that happens is I get this phone call saying, I'm in this show in London, Elvis, he said, because Elvis had just died. They got the musical on at the Astoria, Charing Cross Road. So Shaky says, would you come and see it? So I came to see it. He was fantastic. I don't care what anybody says about Shakin Stevens. You couldn't deny it. When you watched him on stage as Elvis, he was fantastic. He swung down on a rope from one of the boxes at the side, all the way around across the stalls, not with a safety harness, hanging onto a rope. And he was just fantastic. So I went to see it, loved it, went backstage to see him. I said, what's happening? He said, I got no manager. I said, really? He said, yeah, and I'm being paid £100 a week. I said, I'm sorry, repeat that. He said, I'm being paid £100 a week. I said, you're the star of this show. You £100 a week? You got sell-out audiences? I said, ridiculous. He said, will you help me? So I said, sure. I said, if you want a manager, I'll manage you. So we signed a contract. I went to see Brian Ricks, who ran the theatre, the Astoria. I said, I'm managing Shaky now. He said, yeah, what can I do for you? I said, you can give him more money for a starter. He said, I have a contract. I said, it's worthless. I said, he'll just say he's unwell every night, won't do your show, we'll get doctor's certificates. That'll be that. You don't want that trouble. He said, what do you suggest? I said, a lot more than 100. I said, add a naught. He said, what? I said, add a naught. I pay him £1,000 a week because he's still had plenty of money in it for you. Finally decided he paid him that. Then we didn't have a record deal. He's a star of a big West End musical. He's got no record deal. I go into CBS, see Dan Loggins, head of A&R. I said, Dan, I said, Shakin Stevens. He said, oh, yeah. He was American, Dan Loggins. He said, yeah. Another one of these Elvis impersonators. I said, hey, you haven't seen him. I said, I'll take you to see the show. Really? He said, do I want to see that? I said, yeah, you do. I took him to see the show. Came out just like the story I gave you earlier about Dick Leahy.
Yeah.
He looked at me and said, what deal do you want? I said, what you got?
Yeah.
We did a deal within 24 hours. Shaky had it signed to CBS. Bang.
Yeah, it's again, well, it's kind of your determination as well, not giving up.
If you believe in something.
Yeah.
Yes. Which
and
I do.
somehow you can take people part of the road with you, and then they have to make their decision because
Sure.
it's their budget. They want to invest in that.
Sure.
They want to put their time and money into it. But yeah, and of course he went on to be a very big star. I don't know how many hits he had, but he had an awful lot.
God, he was the biggest selling singles artist of the 1980s in the UK.
Yeah. And he was a bit like Showaddywaddy. He never really was hip as such.
No.
But a lot of people loved him and bought his records.
No. That's right. That's right. That's that difficult crossover between commercialism and artistic integrity. It's always been a problem. People have always said to me about that, why did you do groups like Showaddywaddy or Shakin Stevens? Why? I said, because audiences like them, audiences love them. That's why.
Yes.
I said, it's not because I'm setting myself up on a pedestal saying, I only do good music. What does that mean? What is good music?
Yes.
Music is what you want it to be. That's all.
Yeah.
There's no great sort of state secret about it. It's what you want it to be.
And what's good music for one person?
It's not for another.
Yeah.
Sure.
No. I think it's good to have the story about Buggles, which you told me earlier. So you had a deal with CBS, I think, or they had a deal with CBS.
We had a deal with CBS with Bruce Woolley. I thought Bruce Woolley would be, here's where one's wrong again, because I didn't see beyond what I was looking at. I thought he would be the biggest thing since sliced bread. Why? He looked like Clark Kent, a Superman. Great dark hair combed back. He looked fantastic. The band, Thomas Dolby, Trevor Horn, all these people. God, this was great. Except the group became very, very difficult while we were recording the first album. I fired Trevor Horn. Can you imagine that? Isn't that great? Me, a record producer, Trevor Horn, a huge hit record producer. I fired him as a bass player because he was always trying to sow dissent between me and Bruce. So I fired him, got another bass player in. We were making the album. We recorded Video Killed the Radio Star. I said to CBS, this is a hit record. We got to put this out now. They said, no, we have to wait. I said, wait for what? He said, wait till the album's finished, then we'll make a choice. I said, okay, can't argue with that. That's fair enough. We're in the studios making the rest of the album. I get a phone call from CBS, says, what's this group called Buggles? I said, I don't know a group called Buggles. I said, why? He said, they're bringing out Video Kill the Radio Star in 3 weeks' time on Island Records. I looked at Bruce Woolley and I said, what do you mean? What are Buggles? He said, it's Jeff Downes and Trevor Horn, who were the co-writers of the song with Bruce. So I said, they can't do this. He said, I've given them permission for the publisher, as a publisher, to do it. I said, this is ridiculous. So I had to go and tell CBS that what had happened, that he'd introduced the song to Trevor. Well, not introduced, they knew it already, of course. But he was actively going to help them make the record, which he did. And it wasn't until the Buggles record first came out that I then discovered from Bruce, he'd actually sung on the Buggles record. So, I mean, you can't get screwed more than that, completely. I'd lost Bruce Woolley as an artist with CBS. I'd lost the song Video Killed the Radio Star because Buggles had made it, originally made it a #1. I mean, hey, I know what's a hit and what isn't a hit very often, but I'm not prepared for the aftermath.
Yeah.
Which is what occurred there.
Yeah. Well, I guess these things happen from time to time, and it's never a smooth path. And people's artistic leanings do take them to paths that aren't always very straight.
Well, that's it. They do what they want to do or what they think is right and everything, because it may not be what you think is right. Simple as that.
Anyway, we're getting near the end now, but I do want to touch on another part of your career, which maybe the most hip, but is very interesting. and you were chosen as the head of a new record label, which was named after a famous car, Lamborghini Records.
So embarrassing, this.
Well, your first signing, I think, wasn't so embarrassing, was it? Your first signing was Steve Hackett.
Steve Hackett. I mean, Steve was an existential performer, and I explained that, but he was on another planet. I don't know whether I even liked what he was doing, but Patrick Mimran, who owned Lamborghini cars, said, he is wonderful. He is a huge star. I said, you may find a few problems. He said, no, we must sign him. I said, okay, so we signed him. Nothing happened. Nothing. So then my business partner, Chris Braffer, who was working for Lamborghini as well, came to me and said, you know Samantha Fox? I said, you mean the page 3 girl? He said, yeah. He said, I'm going out with her. I said, Chris, and again I can say this because he's no longer with us. I said, she's 16 years old. I said, you shouldn't be doing that. I said, she's going to be a star as well. She can sing. I said, I can't believe that, Chris. He said, she can. So he persuaded me to sign Samantha Fox, except the owner of Lamborghini Records said, what is she? She just has big tits. I said, yeah. I said, but every page 3 fan in this country will go out and buy her record because it's her. Well, I do not like her just because she has tits. I said, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to sell records. So that was it.
And she sold records.
She sold records, yeah.
But how is your approach different? You go in the studio with someone who's young, she's not really a musician as such.
No.
She's a person that's fronting, if you like, an image. How do you differ your approach doing that than when you're working with a real musician?
That's a very good question. When you're working with a real musician, you've got to bear in mind they'll have their own attitudes and wants and desires about what they do and how they do it. When you're working with someone who's not a musician at all, you can mold them. You can tell them what you want and what you'd like them to do. And generally they're receptive because otherwise they'd have no idea what to do.
Yeah, so it becomes more your record than just a combination of you and the artist as such, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
And I guess that was a little bit the same with Showaddywaddy, was it? Although they were musicians, they were
very funny. Quick story about Showaddywaddy to show you that you're on the right track there completely. When we did Hey Rock and Roll, we got to the chorus, hey rock and roll, bum, 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 like that, you see. They were ear-shattering on the microphone. They were all grouped around one mic, just shouting out, hey rock and roll. So I stopped the track and I said, guys, when you get to that bit, I said, you want to back off the mic because you're blowing our eardrums in here and it won't translate onto disc. So they said, how do we do that? And it says, Buddy. So I said, well, Buddy, what happens is the engineer and I come out there, we take you by an elbow each and hold you back from the microphone for that bit and then put you back again. Oh, he said, right, okay. So the next take comes, they don't move off the mic. Hey, rock and roll, like that. You see, I pressed the talk back again. I said, what happened? He said, nobody come out. They really believed me. Yeah. Bless their hearts.
So, and then sort of after that, you did work, I think, briefly with Belle and Sebastian, 2002.
Yeah, I did. That was the last chart act that I worked with.
Yeah. And then after that, just tell us briefly for the last sort of 3 or 4 minutes what you've been doing since, because you've been doing some interesting things.
First of all, I had a theatre group for kids, which all my children run. I've got 6 children, as I say. 4 of them run theatre groups for children, because that's what my mother did. So I've written plays for them, musicals for them, pantomimes for them. So I've enjoyed doing that. So they're presented around the country in different theatres. But I lecture, most of all, to schools on the history of English-speaking popular music. Not as dumb as it sounds, because most pop music around the world has that one thing in common. It's generally in the English language. That's the lingua franca of pop. Of course, because of Hollywood, because of everything else. Of course it is. Same as the movies.
And you wrote a book as well. Which
I wrote a book called Every Song Tells a Story.
Yes. Yeah.
about the history from the Middle Ages until now. So I go in there with a guitar, I sit on a stool, and I take them from Barbara Allen, the old folk song in the 16th century, right the way through to Ed Sheeran, and try and explain why this happened here, why that happened there. And, hey, it's fun.
And I think one of the things, because I did read that book, I meant to bring it in the studio here with me, I left it outside, but maybe we'll show the image at the end. But wasn't it 1066 when the first song was recorded? I don't mean recorded in the studio, but it was recorded insofar as it was talked about, and that was the Battle of Hastings by a French
knight / minstrel.
Yes.
He sang the Song of Roland, and he died at the Battle of Hastings because he was allowed the honour of charging the English ranks first, and they cut him to pieces. As I said in the book, that's the first instance of a musician dying on the south coast of England. Subsequently, hundreds have, if you think about it. We always say that, don't we, about musicians? God, I died last night. That's true.
Mike, I'm just going to show some CDs, which are not on
There's
Trade
terrible
Red.
pictures, I mean.
But I'm just going to show them, in fact, just to show that you have some archives out, which I did play, which shows many of the things that you've recorded over the years. And these can be found, I think they're only secondhand now, but they can be found on Amazon or...
Secondhand, I love it.
And but there's some interesting recordings on there. So thank you for coming in here, Trade Red TV, and sharing your life story. We've done the whole thing in 65 minutes, which isn't really that fair, because we could have gone for 2 or 3 hours, but it is what it is. And I think you've had a fascinating career. And really you've, as I said right at the beginning, you've pushed yourself forward when necessary. But there's been substance behind you when you've believed in what you're doing.
I like to think so.
Yeah.
Thanks, Iain.
Okay. And thanks again, everyone out there, for watching Trade Red TV. And I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.